Good evening, dear viewer. Allow me to pull back the curtain and invite you into a tale that is equal parts thrilling and unsettling. A story that dances on the razor's edge between ambition and consequence. You are about to step into a world where science dares to resurrect the past, where the line between genius and hubris blurs, and where the consequences of playing God are as vast and icy as the Arctic tundra itself. I must warn you, this is not a story for the faint of heart. It is a tale of brilliance and folly, of hope and hubris, of a woman who reached into the depths of time and pulled forth a creature long thought lost to history. But as you will soon discover, some doors, once opened, cannot be closed. So, settle in, dim the lights, and prepare yourself for a journey into the chilling unknown. Let us begin Resurrection Protocol. Dr. Ilara Finch watched through the reinforced glass as the woolly mammoth took its first staggering steps. The artificial womb, a towering chamber of bioengineered amniotic fluid, drained slowly, revealing the massive, wet form of the calf. Its thick, auburn fur clung to its body, muscles trembling as it adjusted to the unfamiliar pull of gravity. She barely breathed. Years of genetic sequencing, countless failures, and whispered doubts from the scientific community had led to this moment. But here it was, alive. A heartbeat thumped in her ears. Whether the mammoth's or her own, she couldn't tell. Ilara stood before the observation dome, the mammoth calf silhouette a blur against the low Arctic light. But her mind was elsewhere. 3 years ago, in a different lab, watching a different resurrection unfold. The dire wolf's howl had echoed through the reinforced glass, not the high-pitched yelp of modern wolves, but something deeper, primal, a war song from a lost age. She remembered the tremble in her fingertips as she'd watched its pack mates arrive. Cloned, grown, released into a wild too modern to understand it. We gave them back their bodies, she told her colleague at the time, but not their world. The first predation incidents were buried beneath layers of PR. Controlled trials gone awry. Expected adjustments. But the look in that animal's eyes had stayed with her. It had looked at them as if they were ghosts. Vitals are stable, came a voice from behind her. It was Dr. Ilya Carter, her closest colleague, one of the few who had believed in her work when the world dismissed it as reckless ambition. Temperature regulation is within perfect parameters. Neural activity normal. A pause. Ilara, you did it. Beyond the sterile walls of the lab, the world had no idea what had just occurred. But they would soon, and nothing would ever be the same. The announcement came 3 days later. Dr. Finch had intended to reveal the mammoth's revival through careful, scientific channels, peer-reviewed journals, controlled press releases, but secrecy was a fragile thing. A leak spread through anonymous biotech forums before exploding into mainstream news. The headlines ranged from awe to alarm. A mammoth reborn! Science resurrects the Ice Age! Playing God? Ethics of reviving extinct species under fire. Resurrection or recklessness? Mammoth birth sparks global debate. Ilara watched from her office as news anchors debated the implications. Footage of the calf, now strong enough to walk under its own weight, looped on every major news network. Some called it a triumph. Others warned of catastrophe. Then came the conspiracy theories. A viral post claimed the mammoth's DNA contained an ancient virus, a pathogen that could trigger a new pandemic. Another insisted this was step one in a secret government program to repopulate the Arctic with bioengineered creatures for military use. Protesters gathered outside her research facility waving signs that read, "Stop the resurrection, and extinction happened for a reason." Still, the offers poured in. Wildlife preserves, billionaires eager to fund private herds, corporations with ideas too vague to trust. She had expected controversy. She hadn't expected chaos. And when the reports of strange ecological shifts began, glacial retreat accelerating, sudden die-offs of tundra species, Alara wondered if she had truly accounted for all the consequences. Alara barely slept. Her inbox overflowed with interview requests, invitations to global summits, veiled threats. Security at the research facility had tripled. Still, none of that concerned her as much as the environmental reports piling on her desk. Satellite imagery showed Arctic permafrost melting faster than any climate model had predicted. Local biologists reported caribou herds declining with no clear cause. And then there were the more anomalous findings. Pockets of methane release in regions where they hadn't been expected for centuries. Alara ran her fingers through her hair, staring at the data. Could this be connected to the mammoth's resurrection? Theoretically, her work aimed to stabilize the Arctic ecosystem. Large herbivores like mammoths had once trampled snow, preventing heat from being trapped beneath thick layers of insulation. In time, a reintroduced population could slow permafrost melt, perhaps even reverse some damage. But the changes were happening too fast. Alara sifted through the atmospheric data, but her eyes kept snagging on an older report. Buried in her archives, a tagged direwolf pack had vanished off-grid 6 months into release. No signal loss, no GPS failure, just gone. She remembered the lead researcher's face on the call, pale, sweating, avoiding her eyes. "We shut that project down," he'd whispered. "We had to. It wasn't the wolves, it was the way they moved, like they remembered something." Alara had laughed it off then, but she wasn't laughing now. Ilya entered without knocking, a tablet in hand. "You need to see this." She skimmed the screen. A field team stationed in northern Siberia had discovered something unusual. Tracks. Not just from the mammoth calf they had carefully monitored, but larger prints. Older. As if something else had moved across the tundra. "That's impossible," Alara murmured. "There was only one." Ilya hesitated. "Unless we weren't the first to bring one back." Alara stood over the print analysis, her mind racing. The tracks were too fresh to be a relic of the past. Something massive had moved across the Siberian tundra recently. The sheer scale of it made her stomach knot. If another mammoth existed, where had it come from? Ilya leaned against the desk. "You're thinking what I'm thinking. If someone else resurrected a mammoth before us, why hide it?" The implications churned in her mind. Their project had taken years of work, cutting-edge gene editing, and billions in funding. No other team had reported anything close to a live birth, unless they hadn't reported it at all. Before she could respond, her phone buzzed. A restricted number. She hesitated, then answered. "Alara Finch," she said. A distorted voice came through. "You don't know what you've woken up." Static, a click. The call ended. Alara's pulse pounded. She met Ilya's gaze. Someone's watching us, and they know more than we do. Alara rewound the security footage for the third time. The research facility was locked down tighter than a government lab, yet something felt off. The call, the tracks in Siberia, the rapid environmental shifts. Too many unknowns were stacking up. Ilya pointed at the screen. "Pause there." She froze the frame. A shadowy figure stood near the facility's outer perimeter, just beyond the reach of the floodlights. The timestamp showed it was taken the night before the anonymous call. "Too far for facial recognition," Ilya muttered, "but they were watching us." Alara exhaled sharply. "We need to get ahead of this." Before she could say more, another alert chimed, this one from a satellite feed monitoring Siberia. A heat signature had been detected in the ice fields. Large. Moving. She pulled up the raw data. It wasn't just an anomaly. It was alive. A sick feeling settled in her stomach. If that's another mammoth, it's not alone. Ilya paled. Then who, or what, is out there with it? Alara's breath felt shallow as she analyzed the heat signature. It was massive, larger than any lone mammoth calf should be. The movement pattern was erratic, stopping and starting, as if something was hesitating or hunting. "This doesn't make sense," she murmured. "Even a full-grown mammoth wouldn't generate this much thermal output." Ilya ran a hand over his face. If this isn't just another mammoth, then what the hell are we looking at? Before she could answer, a knock rattled the door. Security Chief Owen Marsh stepped inside, his normally calm expression edged with tension. "We have a problem," he said. Alara and Ilya exchanged a glance before following him down the corridor. He led them to the server room, where a row of monitors displayed real-time facility data. One screen flickered with lines of corrupted code. "We were breached," Marsh said grimly. "Someone got into our system last night. It was subtle, just a data skim. But they accessed environmental models, gene sequencing logs, and field reports." Alara's stomach dropped. "They were looking for something specific," Marsh nodded, "and they found it." A pit formed in her gut. Someone had infiltrated their research, not just to spy, but to confirm something they already suspected. Ilya folded his arms. "So now we're not just dealing with an ecological mystery, we're dealing with an intelligence operation." Alara's pulse quickened, and we have no idea who's pulling the strings. Alara sat in the dim glow of her office, scrolling through the data breach logs. The attack had been precise. Whoever had infiltrated their system hadn't just been looking for information. They had been looking for confirmation. But of what? Ilya stood by the window, arms crossed. "We need to assume whoever did this already knew about the mammoth, maybe even before we went public." Alara frowned. Then why wait until now to breach us? A new thought formed, unsettling in its weight. "What if they weren't looking for our mammoth?" she said. "What if they were looking for something else? Something older?" Ilya's eyes narrowed. "You think something survived?" Alara exhaled. "We revived a mammoth by reconstructing its DNA. But what if something never fully went extinct? What if it was trapped in the permafrost, dormant until now?" A silence stretched between them. Then, Marcia's voice cracked over the intercom. "Dr. Finch, you're going to want to see this." In the control room, satellite footage had updated. The heat signature in Siberia was changing, splitting. What had once been a singular moving mass was now 2, 3, then 4 distinct entities. Ilya's voice was barely above a whisper. "That's not just one creature out there." Alara's skin prickled. The ice hadn't just thawed. Something had woken up. Alara gripped the edge of the control panel, her mind racing. 4 distinct heat signatures, moving independently. The mammoth had been a resurrection, an act of science. But this was something else. Ilya's fingers flew across the keyboard, enhancing the satellite feed. The shapes weren't fully defined, but they were large. Not as massive as a full-grown mammoth, but bigger than wolves and faster than caribou. "What are we looking at?" Marsh muttered. Alara swallowed. Something that wasn't supposed to be here. She flipped through the environmental data, cross-referencing temperature fluctuations and ice core readings. There, an anomaly. A subterranean cavern, once buried beneath permafrost, had recently opened up due to accelerated thawing. The location matched the movement pattern of the heat signatures. Ilya leaned in. "Are you saying these things came from inside the ice?" Alara nodded slowly. "It's possible they were trapped for thousands of years, preserved, maybe even alive in some form. Hibernation, metabolic suspension, something we haven't encountered before." Marcia's jaw tightened. "And now, they're awake." Before Alara could respond, a new alarm blared, another alert from the Siberian field team. "Unidentified life forms detected near base camp. Movement approaching. Signal unstable. Requesting immediate..." The transmission cut to static. The room fell silent. Then Ilya whispered the words none of them wanted to say. "We aren't the only ones watching them." Alara forced herself to breathe as she replayed the field team's last transmission. The signal had cut out mid-sentence. Not a technical failure, but interference. Something, or someone, had silenced them. "We need eyes on that base camp," Marsh said, already signaling his security team. "If those researchers are in danger..." Ilya cut him off. "I've already pulled drone footage." He pointed to a secondary monitor as the live feed flickered to life. The Siberian research station came into view, its modular building sitting stark against the white expanse. But something was wrong. Snow was churned up, deep gouges torn through the ice, equipment lay scattered, some of it crushed as if trampled by something heavy. Alara leaned forward. Where are the people? Then, movement. One of the thermal signatures, the ones they had been tracking, stepped into view. It wasn't a mammoth. At first, the creature looked almost familiar. Thick, matted fur, elongated limbs built for cold. But its proportions were wrong. The head was too elongated, the forelimbs too dexterous. It moved with unsettling intelligence, sniffing at the broken equipment before vanishing into the storm. Alara's blood ran cold. That's not just a prehistoric animal. Ilya's voice was barely above a whisper. It's something else entirely. The base camp was abandoned. No bodies, no signs of struggle, only tracks, leading away into the ice fields. Marsh exhaled sharply. Whatever woke up out there, it took them. Alara clenched her fists. We didn't just resurrect the past, we unearthed something that was never meant to return. Alara barely heard the voices around her as she studied the tracks leading away from the abandoned base. The drone's thermal imaging showed the imprints in the ice, deep, deliberate. Not random like fleeing animals, but structured, almost purposeful. They weren't dragged, she murmured. They walked. Ilya paled. You think they were taken alive? Marsh crossed his arms, or coerced. Either way, we need boots on the ground. Alara turned sharply. You want to send a team into that? She gestured to the screen where the last heat signature had disappeared into the storm. Marsh's expression was unreadable. Those people are missing. We don't leave them. Before Alara could argue, another alert flashed across the monitor. A new heat signature. This one, much closer. Her breath caught. It's moving toward the drilling site. Ilya frowned. That's impossible. We have perimeter security. No animal could get that close without a gunshot rang through the radio feed, then shouting. Contact! We have... Jesus Christ! What is that? A burst of static swallowed the transmission. Alara's hands clenched the desk. Marsh was already barking orders. Seal the facility. Nobody in or out. He turned to her. Whatever this is, it's not just in Siberia anymore. Ilya's voice was tight. We brought the past back to life. Alara swallowed hard, and now it's coming for us. Alara barely registered the alarms blaring through the facility. Every screen in the control room flickered with security feeds. Most showed only swirling snow, but one captured the drilling site. The perimeter floodlights cast long shadows over the ice, and in their glow, something moved. A dark shape, hunched, powerful, lingered at the edge of the lights. Thick fur bristled against the wind. It moved with unnatural stillness, head tilted as if watching. Then, in a blink, it was gone. Marsh swore. We need a team out there. Now. Ilya shook his head. You saw what happened at the base camp. We send people in blind, we lose them. Alara barely heard them. Her focus was on the playback. She rewound the footage, freezing it at the exact moment the creature had turned its head. A sliver of face was visible. Her stomach clenched. It wasn't just an animal. The forward-facing eyes, the structure of its skull, there was something eerily familiar about it. This isn't just some prehistoric predator, she whispered. It's adapting. Ilya exhaled. Then the question isn't what we woke up. His voice was barely above a whisper. It's who. Alara's pulse thundered as she zoomed in on the frozen frame. The creature's profile, its sloped brow, its deep-set eyes, was unlike any known species. But there was an intelligence in its gaze, a calculation that sent a chill through her bones. Ilya broke the silence. We need to reassess everything. If this thing isn't just an animal, if it's thinking, Marsh cut in, then it's a threat, and we neutralize threats. Alara turned on him. You don't even know what it is yet. If we go in guns blazing... A new alert interrupted her. This time, it wasn't from the perimeter. It was inside the facility. Marsh's hand went to his sidearm. We're in lockdown. No one should be moving. Alara's breath caught as she pulled up the interior security feed. The lower research wing, where they had stored genetic samples, tissue cultures, and sequencing data, had lost power. The emergency lights cast eerie red glows along the corridors. A shadow passed by the camera. Ilya whispered, "Tell me that was just a glitch." Alara's hands trembled over the controls as she cycled through the feeds. The shadow reappeared. It moved fluidly, almost deliberate. Then, for the briefest moment, it turned toward the camera. A distorted, elongated face, wide, knowing eyes. Then the screen cut to static. A cold weight settled in Alara's chest. "It's not just watching us," she murmured. Marsh's grip tightened on his weapon. "It's already inside." Alara's breath came shallow as the security feed remained static. The lower research wing had gone dark, and whatever had been moving through it was no longer visible. Marsh activated his radio. "Security report. Silence." Then, "Movement in Lab 2. No sign of forced entry. Checking." A sharp hiss, a brief scuffle, a gurgled choke. Then nothing. Alara's stomach twisted. Ilya exhaled. "We just lost them." Marsh moved. "I'm going down there." "No!" Alara snapped. "We don't know what we're dealing with yet." "Exactly." He chambered around in his pistol. "And I'm not waiting to find out the hard way." Alara turned back to the screen, forcing herself to think. The creature, or whatever it was, had bypassed security without tripping alarms. It knew how to move within the facility, because it understood the facility. She swallowed hard. "Ilya, pull up the deep storage archives. I want every sequencing log from the Mammoth Project and anything else we've extracted from the ice." He shot her a wary glance but obeyed, fingers flying over the keyboard. Data scrolled across the screen, strings of DNA sequences, viability reports, mitochondrial reconstructions. Then he froze. "Alara," he said slowly, this isn't just mammoth DNA." She leaned in, scanning the data. The highlighted sequences were familiar. Too familiar. Because they were human. Her heart slammed against her ribs. Ilya whispered, "We didn't just bring back a mammoth." Alara's hands trembled. "We resurrected something that should have stayed extinct." Alara's mind reeled as she stared at the sequencing data. The highlighted strands, fragments of ancient human DNA, were unmistakable. They weren't just dealing with an unknown species. They were dealing with something once human. A crash echoed through the facility. Marsh reacted instantly, gun raised. That came from the main corridor. Alara's pulse hammered as she switched feeds. The emergency lights flickered, casting the hallway in stuttering red. A figure moved at the far end. Not an animal, not a hallucination. Tall, limbs elongated, but upright. Its posture unnatural, hunched, yet fluid. Thick, ice-matted hair clung to its frame, and its face, elongated jaw, two wide eyes, held an unsettling blend of primal instinct and awareness. Alara's breath hitched. It wasn't just watching them anymore. It was studying them. Then it moved. Fast. The camera feed cut out. A sickening weight settled in Alara's gut. "It's coming this way." Marsh didn't hesitate. "We fall back. Secure the lab." But Alara barely heard him. Her thoughts were spinning too fast. The DNA, their Mammoth Project. It had been contaminated. They hadn't just revived extinct animals. They had reawakened a forgotten branch of humanity. A species that had survived something it never should have. And now it wanted something from them. Alara forced herself to focus. Panic wouldn't help them now. The creature was inside, moving through the facility like it understood the layout. It had chosen to retreat instead of fight outright, which meant it had a plan. Marshall loaded his weapon, jaw tight. "We need to assume it's heading for a specific target." Ilya was already working, pulling up internal schematics. The vents connect to multiple labs, but if it's avoiding a fight, it's not hunting randomly. It's going somewhere. Alara thought fast. It bypassed security, took out communications, but it hasn't attacked us directly. If it was purely predatory, we'd already be dead. Ilya paled. Then what does it want? A new alert flashed. Unauthorized access. Cryogenic storage. Alara's blood went cold. The genetic samples, she whispered. Ilya's fingers flew over the keyboard, pulling up the feed. The storage vault's doors had been forced open. Not by brute strength, but with precise, deliberate tampering. Inside, among the rows of frozen specimens, a lone figure moved. The creature stood before the containment units, its long fingers grazing the glass panels that held remnants of the past. DNA samples, recovered tissue from preserved icebound remains. It wasn't just an animal scavenging for food. It was looking for something. Marsh didn't hesitate. "We lock it down." Alara grabbed his arm before he could move. "Wait." He turned on her, eyes blazing. "Wait? It's inside our most sensitive lab, and you want to sit here?" She met his glare. "Think, Marsh. It had every opportunity to kill us. It didn't. It's searching for something. What if we need to know what?" The security feed flickered. The creature moved methodically, passing over some samples without pause, hesitating on others. Then, abruptly, it stopped. It had found what it was looking for. The sample case, old but intact, its contents frozen in time. Ilya zoomed in. His breath hitched. The camera cut out. The temperature alarms in cryogenic storage blared. The containment seals were failing. Alara's stomach lurched. Whatever was in that case, whatever had just been awakened, was about to change everything. Alara's hands moved slowly across the old case's edge. The texture felt wrong, warmer than it should have been, as though something pulsed beneath the surface. She cracked the latch, the hiss of ancient vacuum seals releasing like a breath held for centuries. Inside, beneath the brittle insulation and data cores, was something she hadn't expected. A hard drive labeled in faded ink. Fenrir Prime. Her mouth went dry. She hadn't seen that code name since her postdoc years, back when the resurrection of the direwolf had dominated headlines for 3 whole weeks before being buried beneath a new war and a stock market crash. Public attention had moved on, but Alara hadn't. She plugged the drive in. A trembling feed bloomed on her monitor, video grainy and heat distorted. The footage was timestamped 10 months before the Fenrir project was officially terminated. A pack of direwolves prowled across a snowy clearing in perfect formation. Not like animals, like a unit. There was a rhythm to their steps, almost mathematical. In the distance, barely visible, stood a figure, hunched, covered in frost. It didn't move. The wolves circled it, then stopped. The lead wolf turned toward the drone camera. Its eyes glowed with the infrared, but something else shimmered behind them, like recognition. It opened its mouth, and the audio spiked. A distortion, like corrupted speech. "It remembers." Alara yanked the cable. The screen went black. Wind howled around the station, but Alara couldn't sleep, not after that footage. The wolf's voice replayed in her mind, tangled with the mammoth's low, rumbling calls and the unnatural quiet that had settled over the permafrost. The thaw was no longer just ecological. Something beneath the ice had awakened. Something that had watched the rise and fall of teeth and fur and frost. Something that might have used the direwolves to test the waters. Sentinels. Scouts. And now the mammoth walked again. She stared out across the white expanse, and for the first time, Alara Finch felt the cold, not just in her bones, but in her blood. The power grid had settled into a low hum, and Alara sat in the darkened lab, lit only by the glow of her terminal. Against her better judgment, she reopened the Fenrir Prime archive. One folder remained unmarked. No metadata, no access logs, just a string of hexadecimal code. She decrypted it slowly, careful not to trip the Deadman protocols embedded in older defense contracts. The file opened without ceremony, no video, just audio. A recorded transmission from the lead Fenrir field technician. The voice was raw, almost frantic. It was never about the genome. "It's something in the pattern. The wolves. When they move in sync. It's like a language, a spatial code. We thought we were rebuilding an extinct predator, but no. We woke up the call, and they responded." Then there was a pause, static, then a whisper she could barely make out buried beneath noise like wind through ancient branches. The ice was never meant to melt. The recording ended there. No signature, no timestamp. Alara sat frozen, her fingers hovering over the keyboard. A language of movement, a resonance older than speech, not written into DNA, but into behavior, into instinct. The wolves had remembered something that predated them. And now, the mammoth walked across the thawing ice, leaving prints in a world that had forgotten what it once promised. She closed the file, hands trembling. There were no errors, no glitches, just a creeping certainty. The Earth had remembered her monsters. Archive reference, Borealis Node 4, Deep Frequency Array. Location, Alert Station, Ellesmere Island. Date, redacted. Status, internal use only. Technician Isla Vance sipped her coffee with a hand that didn't quite stop shaking. The deep frequency scanner had lit up just before 0300 hours. No weather anomalies, no seismic shifts, but the signal. The signal was still live. Chorus of long, low pulses wrapped in harmonics that didn't belong to any geologic register. They weren't geological. They weren't man-made either. The station's AI had tagged them as biological. She replayed the audio. The first time, it sounded like wind through a hollow bone. The second time, she heard something beneath it, like hooves. Or was it the rhythm of breath? On the third playback, she heard what she would never admit aloud. Footsteps in snow, spaced wide apart and getting closer. She stared at the waveforms, overlapping arcs spiraling inward, the same pattern they dismissed 6 months ago during the Fenrir anomaly review, the same pattern that was now repeating every 22 minutes and 17 seconds, perfectly synchronized across 3 continents. She sent the file up the chain, and then, just before sunrise, another signal appeared. Shortwave, faint. A voice this time, buried in static. We didn't resurrect them. We just opened the door. Then silence. The file corrupted. The station lights flickered once. Outside, the cold deepened, and in the distance, where there should have been nothing, something howled. Not a wolf. Not exactly. Something remembering how. And so, dear viewer, we come to the end of our tale. A story that began with a spark of brilliance and ended in the cold, unyielding grip of consequence. Dr. Elara Finch's dream of resurrection was a flame that burned brightly, but like all flames, it consumed everything in its path. As I close this book and return you to the safety of your world, I leave you with this thought. The past is a fragile thing, and tampering with it is a gamble with stakes too high to fathom. The mammoths may be gone, but their story lingers, a ghostly reminder of the price we pay when we dare to defy nature's laws. Until next time, remember, some mysteries are best left buried, and some doors are best left closed. Good night.